stone, blocking any possible retreat. The chain pulled on, and the cart rolled up at an angle as steep as the paralleling staircase. Drizzt could see nothing ahead, for the wheelbarrow, designed for a circular fit, took up the entire height and width of the tunnel. Drizzt noticed then that the cart had little wheels along its sides as well, aiding in its passage. It felt so good to be in the presence of such intelligence, but Drizzt could not ignore the dangers surrounding him. The Zerfnebli would not take well to an intruding drow elf. It was likely they would strike out with weapons, not questions. After several minutes, the passage leveled off and widened. A single Zerfnebli was there, effortlessly turning the crank that hauled up the wheelbarrows. Intent on his business, the deep gnome did not notice Drizzt's dark form dart from behind the last cart and silently slip through the room's side door. Drizzt heard voices as soon as he opened the door. He continued ahead, though, having nowhere else to go, and dropped to his belly on a narrow ledge. The deep gnomes, guards and miners were below him, talking on a landing at the top of the wide stairway. At least a score stood there now, the miners recounting the tales of their rich find. At the back of the landing, through two immense and partly ajar metal-bound stone doors, Drizzt caught a glimpse of the Zerfnebli city. The drow could see but a fraction of the place, and that not very well from his position on the ledge, but he guessed that the cavern beyond those massive doors was not nearly as large as the chamber housing Menzo Baranzar. Drizzt wanted to go in there. He wanted to jump up and rush through those doors, give himself over to the deep gnomes for whatever judgment they deemed fair. Perhaps they would accept him. Perhaps they would see Drizzt Do'Urden for who he truly was. The Zerfnebli on the landing, laughing and chatting, made their way into the city. Drizzt had to go now, to spring up and follow them through the massive doors. But the hunter, the being who had survived a decade in the savage wilds of the Underdark, could not move from the ledge. The hunter, the being who had defeated a basilisk and countless other of this dangerous world's monsters, could not give himself over in the hopes of civilized mercy. The hunter did not understand such concepts. The massive stone doors closed, and the moment of flickering light in Drizzt's darkening heart died with a resounding crash. After a long and tormented moment, Drizzt Do'Urden rolled off the ledge and dropped to the landing at the top of the stairs. His vision blurred suddenly as he made his way down, the path away from the teeming life beyond the doors, and it was only the primal instincts of the hunter that sensed the presence of more Zerfnebli. The hunter leaped wildly over the startled deep gnomes and rushed out again into the freedom offered by the wild Underdark's open passageways. When he had put the Zerfnebli city far behind, Drizzt reached into his pocket and took out the statuette, the summons to his only companion. A moment later, though, Drizzt dropped the figurine back, refusing to call the cat, punishing himself for his weakness on the ledge. If he had been stronger on the ledge beside the immense doors, he could have put an end to his torment, one way or another. The instincts of hunter battled Drizzt for control, as he made his way along the passages that would take him back to the moss-filled cavern. As the Underdark and the press of undeniable danger continued to close in around him, the primal, alert instinct denying any further distracting thoughts of the Zerfnebli and their city. Those primal instincts were the salvation and the damnation of Drizzt Do'Urden. 3. Snakes and Swords. How many 10 days has it been? Demon signaled to Griza in the silent hand-code of the drow. How many 10 days have we hunted through these tunnels for our renegade brother? Demon's expression revealed his sarcasm as he motioned the thoughts. Griza scowled at him and did not reply. She cared for this tedious duty even less than he. She was a high priestess of Loth and had been the eldest daughter, accorded a high place of honor within the family structure. Never before would Griza have been sent off on such a hunt, but now, for some unexplained reason, Sinefe Hunnet had joined the family, relegating Griza to a lesser position. 5, Demon continued, his anger growing with each darting movement of his slender fingers. 6, How long has it been, sister? He pressed. How long has Nana been sitting at Matron Malice's side? Breeze's snake-headed whip came off her belt, and she spun angrily on her brother. Demon, realizing that he had gone too far with his sarcastic prodding, defensively drew his sword and tried to duck away. Breeze's strike came faster, easily defeating Denon's pitiful attempt at a parry, and 3 of the 6 heads connected squarely on the elder boy Doerden's chest and shoulder. Cold pain spread through Denon's body, leaving only a helpless numbness in its wake. His sword arm dropped and he started to topple forward. Breeze's powerful hand shot out and caught him by the throat as he swooned, easily lifting him onto his toes. Then, looking around at the other 5 members of the hunting party to ensure that none were moving in Denon's favor, Breeza slammed her stunned brother roughly into the stone wall. The high priestess leaned heavily on Denon, one hand tight against his throat. A wise male would measure his gestures more carefully, Breeza snarled aloud, though she and the others had been explicitly instructed by Matron Malice not to communicate in any method other than the silent code once they were beyond Benzoberranzon's borders. It took Dina a long while to fully appreciate his predicament. As the numbness wore away, he realized that he could not draw breath, and though his hand still held his sword, Breeza, outweighing him by a score of pounds, pinned close to his side. Even more distressing, his sister's free hand held the dreaded snake whip aloft.
Hey, Bastian, how you doing, bro? Since you're here, let's do it, Dad.
The animated snake heads could coil and strike from close range, simply as an extension of their wielder's will. Matron Malice would not question your death, Breeza whispered harshly. Her sons have ever been trouble to her. Demon looked past his hulking captor to the common soldiers of the patrol. Witnesses? Breeza laughed, guessing his thoughts. Do you really believe they will speak against the priestess for the sake of a mere male?
Take a drink first before I do it, Dad.
Right up to Demon's. A mere male corpse? She cackled.
How you been doing, Bastian?
Suddenly, and he dropped to his knees, struggling to regain a normal rhythm to his breathing. Come, Breeza signaled in the silent code to the rest of them. I sense that my brother is not in this area. We should return to the city and restock our packs. Demon watched his sister's back as she made the preparations for their departure. He wanted nothing more than to put his sword between her shoulder blades. Demon was smart enough to try such a move. Breeza had been hostess of the Spider Queen for more than 6 years and was not in the favor of law, even if the princess and the rest of the house was known. Even if the evil goddess had not been
about the same.
Breeza was a formidable foe.
Just chilling and stayed out of trouble.
My sister. She started. Breeza spun on him, surprised that he would dare to speak aloud. Accept my apologies, Demon said. Emotion for the other soldiers, and returned to using the hand, so that the commoners would not notice further conversation. I am not pleased with the addition of Xenophage net to the family, Demon explained. Breeze's lips curled up in one of her typically ambiguous smiles. Demon couldn't be sure if she
It did say backwoods on there, but it wasn't put on there very
wise
good.
enough to question the decisions of Matron Malice. Her fingers asked. No, Demon signaled back emphatically. Matron Malice does as she must, and always for the welfare. But I do unnet. Xenophage watched her house smashed into bits of heated rock by the judgment of the ruling council. All of her treasured children were slain, and most of her commoners as well. And she truly loss. Understand that loyalty is owed only. Xenophage's house is no more, thus Xenophage is no more.
Hey, sports talk.
Now, and by the order of the Spider Queen,
Oh, backwoods is
all of the responsibilities
a type of cigar.
The name. I do not trust her, Demon reiterated. Nor my sisters, the true Doerns, moved down the path to make room quagmire or
That's
house
a
among the
cigar that's
commons.
actually wrapped with
Breeza snarled at him, though she
a tobacco leaf
wholeheartedly
that you could
Sheena's rank in the family is of no concern
unwrap
to
the
you.
cigar,
Housewarden is strong
which I
for
usually
the addition
do,
of another high
which
priestess.
everyone
That is all a
usually
male
does.
need care about.
Unwrap the cigar, throw the tobacco out,
And wisely sheathed his sword
fill it
before
with
he dared to rise from his knees.
weed instead, and then roll it up. That way you have pretty much a blunt.
Watch her volatile brother out of the corner of her eye. He knew that his survival
Pretty much
depended on his ability
a
to
weed
walk
cigar,
beside his sister,
if you
for
will.
Malice would continue to send Breeza out on these hunting patrols beside him. The best chance of finding and capturing Dean, having been a patrol leader for the city for more than a decade, was the most familiar of anyone in the house with the tunnels beyond Menzo Baronson. Demon shrugged at his rotten luck and followed his
But it was also the brand of the device I just used to smoke some wax.
Back on the prowl for their elusive and dangerous brother, whom demons truly had no desire to find. Guinevere's head turned abruptly, and the great panther froze perfectly still.
It's almost like a little drawstring bag that can hold this in.
Come, my friend, let us see what new enemy has entered our domain. They stalked together, equally silent, down corridors they knew so very well. Drizzt stopped suddenly, and Guinevere did likewise at the echo of a scuffle. It was made by a boot, Drizzt knew, and not by some natural monster of the Underdark. Drizzt pointed up to a broken pile of rubble, overlooking a wide and many-tiered cavern on its other side. Guinevere led them, where they could find a better vantage point.
Yeah, it's pretty much it's a cigar company or a brand of cigar. There is people that actually smoke them as cigars, but the majority, I don't want to say majority, but a good portion that people use them just pretty much for their tobacco leaf that's wrapped in.
Had found this group easily. Breeza stopped suddenly.
Oh, and they have lots of different types of hoodies because they'll have the different hoodies for the different flavors of cigars. So they'll have some grape flavored or bourbon flavored, honey flavored. They have a good amount of different flavors, I guess you could say. If I remember, I think they actually have like beanies, hats, like shorts, sweats.
Can you be sure it is Drizzt? Demon's fingers asked. He could barely keep the movements precise enough to convey his thoughts. Perhaps some scavenger. We know that our brother lives. Breeza motioned quickly. Matron Malice would no longer be out of law's favor if it were otherwise. And if Drizzt lives, then we can assume that he possesses the item. The subtly evasive movement of the patrol caught Drizzt by surprise. The group could not possibly have seen him under the cover of the jutting rocks, and he held faith in the silence of his footfalls and of Guinevere's. Yet Drizzt felt certain that it was he the patrol was hiding from. Something felt out of place in this whole encounter. Dogs were rare this far from Menzo Baron.
Surprisingly, they do have a slight grape flavor to it, or grape taste, should I say.
Still, he suspected that more than chance had brought this group to his domain. Go, Guinevere, he whispered to the cat. View our guests and return to me. The panther sped away through the shadows, circumventing the large cavern. Drizzt sank low into the rubble, listened and waited. Guinevere returned to him, facing their cat.
Kinda. You get a hint of it on a lot of them.
When Drizzt took a moment from his pondering to study Guinevere's reaction, he realized that his assumptions were wrong. The panther had backed away from him a step and seemed agitated by his stream of suppositions. And who? Drizzt asked.
Because it's all going to have the flavor of it. It's just that you'll be able to tell that it's artificial on some of it, depending on how good of a job they did, should I say.
Revealing a few gold coins, a small gemstone, and the emblem of his house, a silvery token engraved with the initials of Daemon and a Shesbe one, House Do'Urden. Drizzt realized at once what Guinevere was hinting at.
And then they probably do.
And again scratched a paw excitedly across the stone. 1,000 memories flooded through his mind at that moment, but all one possible Drizzt had abandoned her and the ways of the Spider Queen, and he knew well enough the ways of law to realize that his actions had not left his mother in good standing.
I think they do have a vanilla. I think they have a vanilla cream. They have a chocolate, a white Russian, and they have a black Russian.
Turning down secret passageways and crossing into the most confusing sections of the area's tunnels.
Try to remember the ones that we had that we sold. They have the original, which could be the natural flavor of tobacco.
And he only had to look at Guinevere to confirm his suspicions that the patrol was still on his trail, perhaps even closer than before.
Oh, damn. I don't know where you're getting those from, Sports Talk, but that's way too much for a 5-pack of them, dude. That's way too much.
In appearance or in thought, what could they be sensing that would be familiar enough with their magical
Because when we had them at the shop, a 5-pack of them, I think we charged like $5. $5 or $10, one of them two, for a 5-pack. Is what we sold them in the store. But $41 for a 5-pack, that's someone doing someone dirty there. That's way too much.
And he could hardly believe that a location smell would recognize it.
I could probably go to one of the local shops here, take a 5-pack up of backwoods and pay between $5 to $10 for it. Maybe a little more just because of the cost of tobacco with the tax and how they're always going up. Might be a little bit more, but it's not going to be nowhere near that much.
Only a noble of House Do'Urden would carry one. Drizzt thought for a moment, then replaced the token and slipped the neck purse over Guinevere's hand.
I would look at a lot of your local corner store. That's what, at least that's what we call them. It's like a little convenience stores. They're sometimes a gas station / convenience store, just like a corner store. It's like just like a corner store. Sometimes they'll have them, and more than likely, especially since you're in the California area, any local head shop or smoke shop will have them.
She held her brother back, signaling that she and Dean would hold their position at the fort to serve as a reserve for both.
Because it's just
high above the scattering,
it's a popular item for people who smoke. They like smoking blunts.
The patrol might have kept pace with him, but it would have no chance at all of catching Guinevere. The plan had been executed and completed to perfection for Drizzt had only meant to lead the patrol on until it was far from his domain and weary of the
because they'll get
search.
those ones that
But
are,
as Drizzt floated,
at least when I,
looking down upon his brother and
back in the
his
day when I was
sister, he
younger,
found himself longing for
we used to
something
use
more.
Swisher
A
Sweets.
few moments passed.
Just take a razor
Then
blade,
Drizzt was
split it down the
certain that
center,
dispatched soldiers
empty them
were a
out,
good
and
distance away.
roll it up.
He drew out his scimitars, thinking then that a meeting with his siblings might not be so bad after all. He moves farther
The
away.
White Russian. Well, they have White Russian and they have Black Russian flavors.
Voice, since she felt certain of her renegade brother's distant position.
I'm told, I haven't tried them two flavors. I've tried other backwoods ones. Just not them two. But I've been told that they're not too bad. They smell pretty good too.
Long before my spells expire. We will find him breathless in a dark hole. But Breeze's cockiness turned to blank amazement a second later, when a dark form dropped right between her and Dean.
Yeah, that was the one with the coffee, I believe, is the Black Russian.
He saw
and the
Drizzt
other
for just
one,
a split second, then his eyes crisscrossed, following the descending arc of a scimitar's
I think the same way, but without
Dean
cream.
went down heavily, with the smooth stone of the floor pressing against his
I think
cheek,
that's the only difference between a Black Russian and a White Russian. I could be wrong,
Even as one hand did its work on Dean,
but I know they have. We
shot a
carry both
scimitar
different
tip
flavors
close to
like that.
Breeze's throat, meaning to force her surrender. Breeza was not as surprised as Dean, though, and she always kept a hand close to her whip. She danced back from Drizzt's attack, and 6 snakeheads shot.
I'm not sure. I haven't tried either the Black Russian or the White Russian.
Drizzt turned full to face him.
We used to sell out of them. Out of all the different backwoods flavors that we carry,
the bite of those dreaded whips, like every
the two
drowned
different
man,
Russians
many
would
times
usually
during
sell
his
out the
childhood.
quickest. That and the
Drizzt,
honey.
Breeza said loudly, hoping the patrol would hear her and understand the call back to her side. Lower your weapons. It does not have to be like this.
The original,
The sound of familiar words, of drow
it
words
was all right.
overwhelmed
People still bought a lot of them, but we sold out of the Russians and the honey.
That his life was more
And I
than
think
mere
one,
survival.
and I think the vanilla.
Lower your weapons, Breeza said again, more pointedly. Why are you here? Drizzt stammered.
I don't know.
Of course, my
I knew it was something like that, but that's definitely good to know.
The war with House Hannet is at long last ended. It is time for you to come home. A part of Drizzt wanted to believe.
Almost like Irish coffees, but with whiskey, but with vodka instead of whiskey, like the Irish coffees are.
Drop the scimitars to the stone and return to the shelter. And the
Oh, we don't work at that smoke shop no more. That smoke shop ended up closing its doors.
Come home, dear Drizzt, she purred, her words holding the bindings of a minor magical spell.
I don't have any, mainly because using those, you're using a natural tobacco leaf, and I don't really smoke, so I'm not really that into nicotine.
To the Spider Queen. Drizzt would never forget that fact. Indeed, Drizzt remembered
we had just too many setbacks. Then when COVID hit and put up regulations on how much we could, how people we could have in there, that kind of.
You must never come this way again.
That kind of just, I guess, was the final straw for the owners with all the other setbacks we were having.
She stood still, her face frozen in that double-edged smile of hers.
So he ended up closing the doors for good.
Which were thick and full by drow standards. The priestess spoke no words, but Drizzt could clearly see that her mouth was moving behind that frozen smile. A spell. Breeza had always been skilled at such deceptions. Go home, Drizzt cried at her. He launched an attack. Breeza ducked away from the blow easily enough, for it was not meant to strike, only to disrupt her spellcasting. Damn you, Drizzt the rogue, she spat, all pretense of friendship gone. Lower your weapons at once, on pain of death. Her snake whip came up in open threat. Drizzt set his feet wide apart. Fires burned in his lavender eyes as the hunter within him rose to meet the challenge. Breeza hesitated, taken aback by the sudden ferocity brewing in her brother. This was no ordinary drow warrior.
Yeah, it's permanently closed. At least one more. At least the one that me and my brother were working at.
Near the top of the drow hierarchy, she would not be frightened away by a mere male. Surrender, she demanded. Driz couldn't even decipher her words, for the hunter standing against Breeza was no longer Driz the word.
But yeah, a little bit after we closed and it went recreational,
was impervious to words and lies.
A lot more definitely showed up.
And the whip's 6 viper heads whirled in, twisting and weaving of their own volition to gain the best angles of attack.
My brother is most hated grower. Let's see, let's see if I can drop this link.
Quick motions, and when her attack routine was ended, she knew only that none of the snakeheads had found a mark, but that only 5 of the heads remained attached to the whip.
Then that's if it's working.
Matched her opponents. Breeza charged in, flailing away with her damaged weapon. Snakes and scimitars and slender drow limbs intertwined in a deadly ballet. A head bit into the hunter's leg, sending a burst of cold pain coursing through his head.
Right there, Sports Talk is a link to his channel.
Splitting a head down the middle, right between the fangs.
He does gaming streams a lot, and at least we try to every day. We do a smoke streams where we just kick back in the living room, listen to music and smoke and
he stood ready to
chat with everyone.
Her whip now sporting only 3 heads stubbornly came in on him.
We usually try to do those every day, as long as nothing comes up on our end.
Might her brother rise to her aid?
And it's usually
but found no strength in his legs to lift him. Damn you!
Between 5 to 7 our time that we usually start them in the evening, should I say?
The of Love lashed out with all of her strength. 3 snakeheads dropped to the floor after a single cross of the hunter's blades. Damn you! Breeza screamed again, this time pointedly at Driz. She grasped the mace from her belt.
Yeah, it's a picture of
brother's head.
One of the spiders on my face.
Caught the clumsy blow long before it found its mark, and the hunter's foot came up and kicked once, twice, and then a 3rd time into Breeza's face before it went back to the floor. Breeza staggered backward, blood in her eyes and running freely from her nose. She made out the lines of her brother's form beyond the blurring heat of her own blood, and she launched a desperate, wide-arcing hook. The hunter sent 1 scimitar to parry the mace.
Yeah, thanks, Sports Talk. Because I think that's this one. That was the first one I got. And then I got.
Demon was up then behind Driz with his sword in his hand. Using all of her discipline, Breeza
they definitely need another Passover. They got faded through the years. Then I have another one that.
All that Demon saw in his
eyes
was his own death. He threw his sword
right here, or right here,
his chest and surrender. The hunter issued
and goes all the way back.
Intelligible, but Demon fathomed its meaning well enough, and he ran away as fast as his legs could carry him. Breeza started to slip around.
That photo was,
but a scimitar blade cut her off, locking under her chin and forcing her
10 years ago.
Back that all she could see
that's
was
a little bit
of the ceiling.
After I got this done, that's pretty much right after. Hey, Bastien, how you doing? Let's do another dab.
Breeza uttered a final prayer to Loth as she felt the razor-sharp edge begin its cut.
Yeah, so that's an older picture. That's when I got my my first one done.
She looked down to see Driz pinned to the floor by a huge black panther. Not taking the time to ask questions, Breeza sped off down the tunnel after Demon.
So it's pretty much freshly shaved. So, and where I went to shave before that tattoo was a place up here that at the time was doing like straight edge shaving with the old fashioned straight edge blades.
Had Guinevere sided against him?
That photo,
his scimitars up between him and the panther. Guinevere made no move.
I think that was like 10 years ago. So that had to been
the click of a crossbow told
maybe more.
Absolute absurdity.
So I had to have been in my 30s.
Dart would have found him, no doubt, but Guinevere sprang up
I'm 45 now, so I was in my 30s during that. I think like my early 30s.
3 drow fighters appeared on one side of the fort, 2 more on the other. All thoughts of revenge on Reza flew from Drew's then, and he followed Guinevere in full flight down the twisting pathways.
What do you mean? Is that still me?
The combative fighters did not even attempt to follow. A long while later, Drizzt and Guinevere turned into a side passage and paused in their flight, listening for any signs of pursuit. Drizzt instructed, and he started slowly ahead, certain that the threat of demon and Reza had been successful. Again, Guinevere dropped to a sitting position. Drizzt looked curiously at the path. I told you to come, he heard. Guinevere fixed a stare upon him, a look that filled the renegade drow with guilt. Then the cat rose and walked slowly toward its master. Drizzt nodded his accord, thinking that Guinevere meant to obey him. He turned and started again to walk off, but the panther circled around him, stopping his progress. Guinevere continued the circular pacing, and slowly the telltale mist began to appear. "What are you doing?" Drizzt demanded. Guinevere did not slow. "I did not dismiss you," Drizzt shouted, as the panther's corporeal form melted away. Drizzt spun around frantically, trying to catch hold of something. "I did not dismiss you," he cried again, helplessly. Guinevere had gone. It was a long walk back to Drizzt's shelter. That last image of Guinevere followed his every step, the cat's saucer eyes boring into his back. Guinevere had judged him, he realized, beyond any doubt. In his blind rage, Drizzt had almost killed his sister. He surely would have slain Breeza if Guinevere had not pounced upon him. At last, Drizzt crawled into the little stone cubby that served as his bedroom. His contemplations crawled in with him. A decade before, Drizzt had killed Massage Hunnet, and on that occasion had vowed never to kill a drow again. To Drizzt, his word was the core of his principles, those very same principles that had forced him to give up so very much. Drizzt surely would have forsaken his word this day, had it not been for Guinevere's actions. How much better, then, was he from those dark elves he had left behind? Drizzt clearly had won the encounter against his sickness, and was confident that he could continue to hide from Breeza, and from all the other enemies that Matron Malice sent against him. But alone in that tiny cave, he realized something that distressed him greatly. He couldn't hide from himself. 4. Drizzt gave no thought at all to his actions as he went about his daily routines over the next few days. He would survive, he knew. The hunter would have it no other way. But the rising price of that survival struck a deep and discordant note in the heart of Drizzt Do'Urden. If the constant rituals of a day warded away the pain, Drizzt found himself unprotected at day's end. The encounter with his siblings haunted him, stating his thoughts as vividly as if it were recurring every night. Inevitably, Drizzt awoke terrified and alarmed, engulfed by the monsters of his dreams. He understood, and the knowledge heightened his helplessness, that no swordplay, however dazzling, could hope to defeat them. Drizzt did not fear that his mother would continue her quest to capture and punish him.
I don't know about you, Jack.
That she certainly would.
Can't stand Jack Daniels.
This was his world, far different from Menzo Berenzon's winding avenues, with ways that the drow living in the city could not begin to understand. Out in the wilds, Drizzt held confidence that he could survive against whatever nemesis Matron Malice sent after him. Drizzt also had managed to release himself from the overwhelming guilt of his actions against Breeza. He rationalized that it was the siblings who had forced the dangerous attack, and it was Breeza, in trying to capture him, who had initiated the combat. Still, Drizzt realized that he would spend many days finding answers to the questions his actions had raised concerning the nature of his character. Had he become this savage and merciless hunter because of the harsh conditions imposed on him? Or was this hunter an expression of the being that Drizzt had been all along? Drizzt would easily answer. They were not foremost among his thoughts. The thing that Drizzt could not dismiss about the encounter with his siblings was the sound of their voices, the melody of spoken words that he could understand and respond to. In all of his recollections of those few moments with Breeza in mind, the words, not the voices, stood out most clearly. Drizzt clung to them desperately, listening to them over and over again in his mind and dreading the day when they would fade away. Then, though he might remember them, he would no longer hear them. He would be alone again. Drizzt pulled the onyx figurine out of his pocket for the first time since Guinevere had drifted away from him. He placed it on the stone before him and looked at his wall scratches to determine just how long it had been since he had last summoned the panther. Drizzt realized the futility of that approach. When was the last time he had scratched that wall? And what use were the markings anyway? How could Drizzt be certain of his count, even if he dutifully notched the mark after every one of his sleep periods? Time is something of that other world, Drizzt mumbled, his tone clearly a lament. He lifted his dagger toward the stone, an act of denial against his own proclamation. What does it matter? Drizzt asked rhetorically, and he dropped the dagger to the ground. The ring, as it struck the stone, sent a shiver along Drizzt's spine, as though it was a bell signaling his surrender. His breathing came hard, sweat beaded on his ebony brow, and his hands felt suddenly cold. All around him, the walls of his cave, the close stone that had sheltered him for years against the ever-encroaching dangers of the Underdark, now pressed in on him. He imagined leering faces in the lines of cracks and the shapes of rocks. The faces mocked him and laughed at him, belittling his stubborn pride. He turned to flee, but stumbled on a stone and fell to the ground. He scraped a knee in the process and tore yet another hole in his tattered puafwi. Drizzt hardly cared for his knee or his cloak when he looked back to the stumbling stone, for another fact assailed him, leaving him in utter confusion. The hunter had tripped. For the first time in more than a decade, the hunter had tripped. Guinevere! Drizzt cried frantically. Come to me, oh please, my Guinevere! He didn't know if the panther would respond. After their last, less than friendly party, Drizzt couldn't be certain that Guinevere would ever walk by his side again. Drizzt clawed his way toward the figurine, every inch seeming a tedious fight in the weakness of his despair. Presently, the swirling mist appeared. The panther would not desert its master, would not hold lasting judgment against the drow who had been its friend. Drizzt relaxed as the mist took form, using the sight of it to block the evil hallucinations in the stones. Soon Guinevere was sitting beside him and casually licking at one great paw. Drizzt locked the panther's saucer eyes in a stare and saw no judgment there. It was just Guinevere, his friend, and his salvation. Drizzt curled his legs under him, sprang out to the cat, and wrapped the muscled neck in a tight and desperate embrace. Guinevere accepted the hold without response, wiggling loose only enough to continue the paw-licking. If the cat, in its otherworldly intelligence, understood the importance of that hug, it offered no outward signs. Restlessness marked Drizzt's next days. He kept on the move, running the circuits of the tunnels around his sanctuary. Matron Malice was after him, he continually reminded himself. He could not afford any holes in his defenses. Deep inside himself, beyond the rationalizations, Drizzt knew the truth of his movements. He could offer himself the excuse of patrolling, but he had, in fact, taken flight. He ran from the voices and the walls of his small cave. He ran from Drizzt Do'Urden and back toward the hunter. Gradually, his routes took a wider course, often keeping him from his cave for many days at a stretch. Secretly, Drizzt hoped for an encounter with a powerful foe, He needed a tangible reminder of the necessity of his primal existence, a battle against some horrid monster that would place him in a mode of purely instinctive survival. What Drizzt found instead one day was the vibration of a distant tapping on the wall, the rhythmical, measured tap of a miner's pick. Drizzt leaned back against the wall and carefully considered his next move. He knew where the sound would lead him. He was in the same tunnels that he had wandered when he went in search of his lost Rothe, the same tunnels where he had encountered the Zwerfneblin mining party a few 10 days before. At that time, Drizzt could not admit it to himself, but it was no simple coincidence that he had happened into this region again. His subconscious had brought him to hear the tapping of the Zwerfneblin hammers, and more particularly, to hear the laughter and chatter of the deep gnomes' voices. Now Drizzt, leaning heavily against a wall, truly was torn. He knew that going to spy on the Zwerfneblin miners would only bring him more torment, that in hearing their voices he would become even more vulnerable to the pangs of loneliness. The deep gnomes surely would go back to their city, and Drizzt again would be left empty and alone. But Drizzt had come to hear the tapping, and now it vibrated in the stone, beckoning him with a pull too great to ignore. His better judgment fought the urges that pulled him toward that sound, but his decision had been made even as he had taken the first steps into this region. He berated himself for his foolishness, shook his head in denial. In spite of his conscious reasoning, his legs were moving, carrying him toward the rhythmic sound of the tapping pickaxes. The alert instincts of the hunter argued against remaining near the miners, even as Drizzt looked down from a high ledge upon the group of Zwerfneblin. But Drizzt did not leave. For several days, as far as he could measure, he stayed in the vicinity of the deep gnome miners, catching bits of their conversations wherever he could, watching them at work and at play. When the inevitable day came that the miners began to pack up their wagons, Drizzt understood the depth of his folly. He had been weak in coming to the deep gnomes. He had denied the brutal truth of his existence. Now he would have to go back to his dark and empty hole, all the more lonely for the memories of the last few days. The wagons rolled out of sight down the tunnels toward the Zwerfneblin city. Drizzt took the first steps back toward his sanctuary, the moss-covered cave with the fast-running stream and the myconid-tended mushroom grove. In all the centuries of life he had left to live, Drizzt would never look upon that place again. He did not later remember when his direction had turned. It had not been a conscious decision. Something pulled at him. The lingering rumble of the ore-filled wagons, perhaps. And only when Drizzt heard the slam of Blingdenstone's great outer doors did he realize what he meant to do. "Gwenevere," Drizzt whispered to the figurine, and he flinched at the disturbing volume of his own voice. The Zwerfneblin guards on the wide staircase were engaged in a conversation of their own now, and Drizzt was quite safe. The grey mist swirled around the statuette, and the panther came to its master's call. Guinevere's ears flattened, and the panther sniffed around cautiously, trying to resolve the unfamiliar setting. Drizzt took a deep breath and forced the words from his mouth. "I wanted to say goodbye to you, my friend," he whispered. Guinevere's ears came up straight, and the pupils of the cat's shining yellow eyes widened, then narrowed again, as Guinevere took a quick study of Drizzt. "In case," Drizzt continued, "I cannot live out there anymore, Guinevere. I fear I am losing everything that gives meaning to life. I fear I am losing myself." He glanced back over his shoulder at the ascending stairway to Blingdenstone. "And that is more precious to me than my life. Can you understand, Guinevere? I need more than simple survival. I need a life defined by more than the savage instincts of this creature I have become." Drizzt slumped back against the passageway's stone wall. His words sounded so logical and simple, yet he knew that every step up that stair to the deep gnome city would be a trial of his courage and his convictions. He remembered the day he'd stood on a ledge outside Blingdenstone's great doors. As much as he wanted to, Drizzt could not bring himself to follow the deep gnomes in. He was fully caught in a very real paralysis that had gripped him and held him firmly when he thought of rushing through the portals into the deep gnome city. "You have rarely judged me, my friend," Drizzt said to the panther. "And in those times, always you have judged me fairly. Can you understand, Guinevere? In the next few moments, we may become lost from each other forever. Can you understand why I must do this?" Guinevere padded over to Drizzt's side and nuzzled its great feline head into the trow's ribs. "My friend," Drizzt whispered into the cat's ear, "go back now before I lose my courage. Go back to your home and hope that we shall meet again." Guinevere turned away obediently and paced to the figurine. The transition seemed too fast to Drizzt this time. Then only the figurine remained. Drizzt scooped it up and considered it. He considered again the risk before him. And, driven by the same subconscious needs that had brought him this far, Drizzt rushed to the stair and started up. Above him, the deep gnome conversation had ceased. Apparently, the guard sensed that someone or something was approaching. But the Zwerfnebli guard's surprise was no less when a drow elf walked over the top of the staircase and onto the landing before the doors of their city. Drizzt crossed his arms over his chest, a defenseless gesture that the drow elves took as a signal of truce. Drizzt could only hope that the Zwerfnebli were familiar with the motion, for his mere appearance had absolutely unnerved the guards. They fell over each other, scrambling around the small landing, some rushing to protect the doors to the city, others surrounding Drizzt within a ring of weapon tips, and still others rushing frantically to the stairs and down a few, trying to see if this dark elf was just the first of an entire drow war party. One Zwerfnebli, the leader of the guard contingent and apparently looking for some explanation, barked out a series of pointed demands at Drizzt. Drizzt shrugged helplessly, and the half-dozen deep gnomes around him jumped back a cautious step at his innocuous movement. The Zwerfneblin spoke again, more loudly, and jabbed the very sharp point of his iron spear in Drizzt's direction. Drizzt could not begin to understand or respond to the sound. Very slowly, and in obvious view, he slid one hand down over his stomach to the clasp of his belt buckle. The deep gnome leader's hands wrung tightly over the shaft of his weapon as he watched the dark elf's every movement. A flick of Drizzt's wrist released the clasp, and his scimitars clanged loudly on the stone floor. The Zwerfnebli jumped in unison, then recovered quickly and came in on him. On a single word from the leader of the group, two of the guards dropped their weapons and began a complete and not overly gentle search of the intruder. Drizzt flinched when they found the dagger he had kept in his boot. He thought himself stupid for forgetting the weapon and not revealing it openly from the beginning. A moment later, when one of the Zwerfnebli reached into the deepest pocket of Drizzt's pawafwi and pulled out the onyx figurine, Drizzt flinched even more. Instinctively, Drizzt reached for the panther, a pleading expression on his face. He received the butt end of a spear in the back for his efforts. Deep gnomes were not an evil race, but they held no love for dark elves. The Zwerfnebli had survived for centuries untold in the Underdark with few allies but many enemies, and they ever ranked the drow elves as foremost among the latter. Since the founding of the ancient city of Lindenstone, the majority of all of the many Zwerfnebli who had been killed in the wilds had fallen at the ends of drow weapons. Now, inexplicably, one of these same dark elves had walked right up to their city doors and willingly surrendered his weapons. The deep gnomes bound Drizzt's hands tightly behind his back, and four of the guards kept their weapon tips resting on him, ready to drive them home at Drizzt's slightest threatening movement. The remaining guards returned from their search of the stairway, reporting no other drow elves anywhere in the vicinity. The leader remained suspicious, though, and he posted guards at various strategic positions, then motioned to the two deep gnomes waiting at the city's doors. The massive portals parted, and Drizzt was let in. He could only hope in that moment of fear and excitement that he had left the hunter out in the wilds of the Underdark. 5. Unholy Ally. In no hurry to stand before his outraged mother, Dinan wandered slowly toward the anteroom to House Do'Urden's chapel. Matron Malice had called for him, and he could not refuse the summons. He found Vienna and Maya in the corridor beyond the ornate doors, similarly tentative. "What is it about?" Dinan asked his sisters in the silent hand code. "Matron Malice has been with Brisa and Sinead all the day," Vienna's hands replied. "Planning another expedition in search of Drizzt." Dinan motioned half-heartedly, not liking the idea that he would no doubt be included in such plans. The two females did not miss their brother's disdainful scowl. "Was it really so terrible?" Maya asked. "Brisa would say little about it." "Her severed fingers and torn whip revealed much," Vienna put in, a wry smile crossing her face as she motioned. Vienna, like every other sibling of House Do'Urden, had little love for her eldest sister. No agreeing smile spread on Dinan's face as he remembered his encounter with Drizzt. "You witnessed our brother's prowess when he lived among us," Dinan's hands replied. "His skills have improved tenfold in his years outside the city." "But what was he like?" Vienna asked, obviously intrigued by Drizzt's ability to survive. Ever since the report that Drizzt was still alive, Vienna had secretly hoped that she would see her younger brother again. They had shared a father, so it was said, and Vienna held more sympathy for Drizzt than was wise, given Malice's feelings for him. Noticing her excited expression, and remembering his own humiliation at Drizzt's hands, Dinan cast a disapproving scowl at her. "Fear not, dear sister," Dinan's hand said quickly. "If Malice sends you out into the wilds this time, as I suspect she will, you will see all of Drizzt you wish to see, and more." Dinan clapped his hands together for emphasis as he ended, and he strode right between the two females and through the anteroom's door. "Your brother has forgotten how to knock," Matron Malice said to Brisa and Sinead, who stood at her sides. Risen, kneeling before the throne, looked up over his shoulder to see Dinan. "I did not give you permission to lift your eyes," Malice screamed at the patron. She pounded her fist on the arm of her great throne, and Risen fell down to his belly in fear. Malice's next words carried the strength of a spell. "Grovel," she commanded, and Risen crawled to her feet. Malice extended her hand to the male, all the while looking straight at Dinan.
"Hey, Ashby, how you doing?"
Did not miss his mother's point. "Kiss," she said to Risen, and he quickly began lavishing kisses onto her extended hand. "Stand," Malice issued her third command. Risen got about halfway to his feet before the matron punched him squarely in the face, dropping him in a heap to the stone floor. "If you move, I shall kill you," Malice promised, and Risen lay perfectly still, not doubting her in the least. Dinan knew that the continued show had been more for his benefit than for Risen's. Still, unblinking, Malice eyed him.
"How's your night or day going?" she said at length.
Dinan accepted the berating without argument, without even daring to breathe, until Malice turned sharply on Brisa. "And you," Malice shouted. 6 trained drow warriors beside you, and you, a high priestess, could not bring Drizzt back to me." Brisa clenched and unclenched the weakened fingers that Malice had magically restored to her hand. 7 against 1, Malice ranted, "and you come running back here with tales of doom." "I will get him, Matron Mother," Maya promised, as she took her place beside Shinina. Malice looked to Vienna, but the second daughter was more reluctant to make such grand claims. "You speak boldly," Dinan said to Maya. Immediately, Malice's disbelieving grimace fell upon him in a harsh reminder that it was not his place to speak, but Brisa promptly completed Dinan's thought. "Too boldly," she growled. Malice's gaze descended upon her on cue, but Brisa was a high priestess in the favor of the Spider Queen, and was well within her rights to speak. "You know nothing of our young brother," Brisa went on, speaking as much to Malice as to Maya. "He is only a male," Maya retorted. "You would be cut down," Brisa yelled. "Hold your foolish words and empty promises, youngest sister. Out in the tunnels beyond Menzoberranzan, Drizzt would kill you with little effort. Malice listened intently to it all. She had heard Breeze's account of the meeting with Drizzt several times, and she knew enough about her oldest daughter's courage and powers to understand that Breeze did not speak falsely. Maya backed down from the confrontation, not wanting any part of a feud with Breeze. Could you defeat him? Malice asked Breeze, now that you better understand what he has become. In response, Breeze flexed her wounded hand again. It would be several 10 days before she regained full use of the replaced fingers. Or you? Malice asked Demon, understanding Breeze's pointed gesture as a conclusive answer. Demon fidgeted about, not knowing how to respond to his volatile mother. The truth might put him at odds with Malice, but a lie surely would land him back in the tunnels against his brother. Speak truly with me, Malice roared. Do you wish another hunt for Drizzt, so that you may regain my favor? Demon stuttered. Then he lowered his eyes defensively. Malice had put a detection spell on his reply, Demon realized. She would know if he tried to lie to her. No, he said flatly. Even at the cost of your favor, Matron Mother, I do not wish to go out after Drizzt again. Maya and Vierna, even Ximena, started in surprise at the honest response, thinking nothing could be worse than a Matron Mother's wrath. Breeza, though, nodded in agreement, for she too had seen as much of Drizzt as she cared to see. Malice did not miss the significance of her daughter's motion. Your pardon, Matron Mother, Demon went on, trying desperately to heal any ill feelings he had stirred. I have seen Drizzt in combat. He took me down too easily, as I believe that no foe ever could. He defeated Breeza fairly, and I have never seen her beaten. I do not wish to hunt my brother again, for I fear that the result would only bring more anger to you and more trouble to House Do'Urden. You are afraid? Malice asked slyly. Demon nodded. And I know that I would only disappoint you again, Matron Mother. In the tunnels that he names as home, Drizzt is beyond my skills. I cannot hope to outdo him. I can accept such cowardice in a man, Malice said coldly. Demon, with no recourse, accepted the insult stoically. But you are a high priestess of love, Malice taunted Breeza. Certainly a rogue male is not beyond the powers that the Spider Queen has given to you. Hear Dinan's words, my matron, Breeza replied. Love is with you, Ximena shouted at her. But Drizzt is beyond the Spider Queen, Breeza snapped back. I fear that Dinan speaks the truth for all of us. We cannot catch Drizzt out there. The wilds of the Underdark are his domain, where we are only strangers. Then what are we to do? Maya grumbled. Malice rested back in her throne and put her sharp chin in her palm. She had coaxed Dinan under the weight of a threat, and yet he still declared that he would not willingly venture after Drizzt. Breeza, ambitious and powerful, and in the favor of Lolth, even if House Do'Urden and Matron Malice were not, came back without her prized whip and the fingers of one hand. Jarlaxle and his band of rogues? Vierna offered, seeing her mother's dilemma. Brigand has been of value to us for many years. The mercenary leader will not agree, Malice replied, for she had tried to hire the soldier of fortune for the endeavor years before. Every member of Brigand abides by the decisions of Jarlaxle, and all the wealth we possess will not tempt him. I suspect that Jarlaxle is under the strict orders of Matron Behenry. Drizzt is our problem, and we are charged by the Spider Queen with correcting that problem. If you command me to go, I shall, Demon spoke out. I fear only that I will disappoint you, Matron Mother. I do not fear Drizzt blades, or death itself, if it is in service to you. Dinan had read his mother's dark mood well enough to know that she had no intention of sending him back out after Drizzt, and he thought himself wise in being so generous when it didn't cost him anything. I thank you, my son, Malice beamed at him. Dinan had to hold his snicker when he noticed all three of his sisters glaring at him. Now leave us, Malice continued condescendingly, stealing Dinan's moment. We have business that does not concern a man. Dinan bowed low and swept toward the door. His sisters took note of how easily Malice had stolen the proud spring from his step. I will remember your words, Malice said wryly, enjoying the power play and the silent applause. Dinan paused, his hand on the handle of the ornate door. One day you will prove your loyalty to me, do not doubt. All 5 of the high priestesses laughed at Dinan's back as he rushed out of the room. On the floor, Risen found himself in quite a dangerous dilemma. Malice had sent Dinan away, saying in essence that males had no right to remain in the room. Yet Malice had not given Risen permission to move. He planted his feet and fingers against the stone, ready to spring away in an instant. Are you still here? Malice shrieked at him. Risen bolted for the door. Hold! Malice cried at him, her words once again empowered by a magical spell. Risen stopped suddenly, against his better judgment.
All right, everyone. Probably gonna call Into This Life for tonight. But I want to thank everyone who stops by and everyone who keeps stopping by. I definitely appreciate all y'all support. Till next time, everyone. Y'all stay safe out there.